Well, Bomber fans, welcome to an early edition of the Friday Footy panel, of course, with the team playing against the Swans at the SCG on Friday night. Of course, coming to you from the Colonial Brewing Company in Port Melbourne. Hope you enjoyed your footy-free weekend in terms of the Bombers. Scotty, I don't like this term, but is this an 8-point game on Friday night?
It is, Jules. You've read my notes. It is very much. And the prevalence of 8-point games this year...
It's a lot of
more
8-point
than ever.
games.
Yeah, there are. Because there's just such a logjam, isn't it? I mean, to see Sydney 0-6 after the first 6 games, they've won 5 of their last 6 now, and they're
the best team in the comp at the moment.
They're the best performed team. I still think, on the weekend I thought Richmond really let that one get away. Yep. They were disappointing against... So the one game that they did lose against Hawthorn was as disappointing a performance as they've had all year. Certainly against the Bulldogs they've been very good. But the Bombers should go into this game full of confidence. I mean, the Bombers the form side after their performances, if you look at their last 5 weeks, and their performance against top 4 teams has been exceptional as well.
We spoke last week on our mid-season review, particularly about the midfield and how they can lift a bit. The team's going to be in a really good place. Yeah. Is this the ultimate test of the Essendon midfield against the Swans?
It is. 2 real reasons that I look into that and think that it is. I mean, the Swans, Ruckman, Sinclair and Naismith have dominated hit-outs the last 2 weeks against the Dogs and Richmond. On the back of that, you've got Hanbury, Parker, Heaney going into the midfield, and of course Kennedy. And if we look quite simply at Saturday's game, Kennedy quiet for 3 quarters. Yeah, he had an enormous last quarter. He was the best player on the ground in the last quarter and really got them over the line. So you're quite right, and particularly SCG, smaller ground, more contests. That's really Sydney's DNA. They live in the contest. They're great around the footy. So it's a real challenge for the Bombers, but also an opportunity to look forward to, because the Bombers have got some big bodies in there. So the ground should really suit when you've got a Heppel, Watson and Goddard playing through the midfield predominantly.
I was going to ask you about the ground though. With Essendon's leg speed, they like to get the ball out in the open. So potentially is the SCG not a great venue for them?
I think it certainly helps them in the middle of the ground. But then on the periphery, you would like Tipper, Fantasia, Josh Green to have some work to operate up forward, and there's just not that space, and they really need to get their forward set up correct in the use of Danaher and Hooker so that they get good separation, because we've seen the last couple of weeks when they've had room to operate, Danaher's been consistently good. Hooksy's had a great fortnight and is really starting to build his form, but you don't want to be running into one another, because that centre half forward position at the SCG almost becomes redundant and you play deeper. So they just need to get their setups correct.
I was going to ask you about that. Is it almost a graveyard for centre half forwards, that ground? I mean, how tough is it going to be for a Hooker or Danaher in that position? Because it basically just goes over your head.
Yeah, that's right. They should look to play 2 of them deeper. Both play almost 30 metres out, 25 metres out, and operate in that regard. Because if you look to play 40 to 70, it'll get kicked over your head all day. That's right.
Is there a chance to expose the Swans a bit like Port Adelaide? If you look at their backline, Grundy's a big body, but they haven't been playing Aaliyah. Marsh and Rampy play much above their height. Is there a chance to... Is there a bit of a weakness there to exploit?
Height's one area that I think you can. They've done really serviceable jobs, Rampy and that, but they don't have the big talls with just Grundy there. And our guest later on, he was a key part of that. And also I think they've got very attacking halfbacks who set them up, critically important in Newman and Lloyd, and also Jones, who's going in and out. He may be unavailable though this week. But what they don't have is quite the shutdown small defenders, Nick Smith aside. So there's a real opportunity for Tipper, Fantasia and Green to cause some headaches also. But like all games, it's going to come down to the midfield. And for Essendon, that's particularly important. They've only won the inside 50 count twice. If they can break even or win that, I certainly think they've got the forward line to win this game.
Now, Buddy Franklin often gives Essendon fans shivers, particularly when he was at Hawthorn.
Always.
Always.
He dines on the Bombers.
Now, we saw last week with the Tigers, quite often they've given the big job to Asprey. They didn't do it last week. It was straight rants went to him. So does John Worsfold go, Hurley, he's your responsibility this week, or do you back Michael Hartley in?
I think the way that the Bombers have tended to play and the way that suits Hurl's best has been him coming off a man and really directing and setting up. Whereas Rance can do either. He's done the layoff a little bit more, but has done a lot of shutdown jobs. I think based on what the Bombers have done previously this year, that they'll give Hartley a crack. I think he's been in excellent form the last month. Very, very good on Dixon. start with that, Hurley to lay off help in the air, and then adjust after that if that's not working.
Notice with the Swans, they've actually lost 3 games at the SCG this year, and 2 of the games, Collingwood and Hawthorn, really denied them the footy. Do you think that's a tactic Essendon will use, or will Essendon just back their own style in to beat them?
Well, Essendon can play that way and have the uncontested marks and just own the ball. And they can also go with great speed, which they would prefer to do. But if we have seen an indicator of what the Swans don't like, it's been the teams that have been able to deny them the ball and prevent as many contests as such. So the ball lives more as an uncontested mark game than an in-close game, which is what Sydney love to do. So I'm sure the Bombers will have taken enormous notice, which is interesting when we talk about the dimensions of the ground.
Yeah,
that opposition have been able to play an uncontested marking style still.
Now, we didn't mention him last week, and you mentioned the Swans ruckman there. Tom Bell-Chambers, has he, do you think, secured that number 1 ruck spot now? And how important has he been since coming back into the side?
He's been very, very important. I thought he was very good against the Giants. He was able to control Mumford, and then he did a very good job on Paddy Ryder and a different style of ruckman. So you had the body up ruckman and then the jumper. So I think what Tom's shown the last 2 weeks is he can play well on either, which gives him the opportunity over the next 3, 4, 5 weeks to really settle into that position.
And with their midfield, is there one you look to put more attention into than the others? I mean, Kennedy looks like a player. You can't really tag Josh
Kennedy's the hardest.
Is Hanbury the one?
Kennedy's the hardest to stop, but the most relevant at the clearance. I still think he'll get his hands on the ball. I think Hanbury's very good at the contest, but has exceptional run on the outside. And I think generally speaking, not talking specifically about Hanbury, but the guys that rely on the outside a little bit more are generally easier to shut down. Doesn't always work that way, but just as a rule of thumb. So I'd think that they'd look to put a lot of time into Hanbury as the obvious one. He's the link player in their run.
Given the Swans' form, it's on their home deck. Is this a game be a bonus if Essendon got up, or should they go in expecting to win this game? On their current form?
Yeah, on current form, they should go in expecting to win this game. History says it is always a bonus against Sydney because of what we know about them. But you made mention of the fact that they've lost 3 games at home this year. So the Bombers should go in full of confidence, knowing that if they play somewhere near their best, they really should win this game. But that's the challenge. We've seen the good and the bad of the Bombers this year. It's all about consistency of performance, quarter to quarter. That's the key. And
Bomber fans, if you can't get to the SCG, great place to watch here at the Colonial Brewing Company on a Friday night footy. Always a big crowd in, the food trucks, and a great place to soak up the atmosphere. Now coming up, we've got a man that you know very well, might have to be playing for his cup this weekend. A former Swan and Bomber. That man is Ted Richards. He'll be with us very shortly.
At Essendon, we had the awesome foursome. Myself, Lucas, Hurd, Lloyd. I was the anchor. Lloydie the decoy. And we had a great little system.